Our agenda will include the two approaches to communication. We will map the field visually. We will go over the 7 traditions of communication, and then we will cover the relevant theories under each tradition. This project uses 7 categories by which the communications discipline is divided into, called traditions. They are socio-psychological, cybernetic, rhetorical, semiotic, sociocultural, critical, and phenomenological. While these research concepts may be rather challenging to grasp, I will endeavor to codify their distinct characteristics. Robert Craig, theorist and scholar who differentiated the various traditions in the field, winnowed what once had been a chaotic and unruly field crowded with, at one count, 249 bombastic theories that lacked coherence and structure, down to a select 7 traditions emerging from this meta-discursive process. When considering communication, we can approach each item on our agenda from 2 separate viewpoints, objective or interpretive. Each of these viewpoints is from a completely different perspective, and all of the theories and traditions lie somewhere along a continuum, with objective and interpretive on 2 opposite ends of a continuum. We will assign each of these theories somewhere along the continuum, each resting medially among 2 dominant poles, objective and interpretive. The 2 classifications of theory perspective are based on simple measurable criteria. The objective approach is founded on the assumption that truth is solid, unvarnished, and absolute. It can be clearly defined and is proven and reached through neutral, dispassionate scrutiny. Objective theories are specific, scientifically measurable, quantitative, based on the premise of less is more, and can be proven through testing. A good objective theory can predict future events and bring clarity to confusing data. Metaphors for a good objective theory are described by a mirror reflecting truth or a net capturing part of the contents of the sea of information. Objective theories require empirical and independent evidence. Objective scholars reject forcing theories into a preset mold. Objectivity opposes the more intuitive interpretive approach. The interpretive approach is qualitative, aesthetically pleasing, and awash in fresh ideas. It seeks truth by believing absolutes as unnecessary, to be in flux based on social pragmatism. These theories endeavor to reform societal ills, clarify value-based ideology, and bring a new understanding of people and events. Interpretive scholars perform the linguistic chore of purporting significance to written work. They conceive multiple meanings or paths to truth. According to our text, rigor and imagination are 2 opposing sides of science. Griffin compares the 2 disciplines of the poles to politics, the conservative Grand Old Party and the liberal Democrats. They might seek out one common goal, but do not hold much mutual respect. These traditions are ordered in a sort of primacy based on my own personal qualifications. I began with socio-psychological first because it is the only theory based on truth, absolute unvarnished truth in an objective sense. And we know as Christians that God is the only source of truth. And this is where I decided to mark my beginning of my traditional values. Next, I chose critical because I think it's important for us to question things. I think that that's an American tenet. I think that that's a Christian tenet, that we would always have free choice and the ability to speak to power, not in a wokeness culture sort of sense, but in the sense of common sense. Next, I like rhetorical because I really enjoy persuasion and the artful address that is aesthetically pleasing of rhetorical. I ordered the rest of the traditions as such in a sort of order based upon their importance and the traditions and the way that the traditions were ordered inside each theory. The first tradition outlined here is the socio-psychological tradition. I see socio-psychological classification as the most important tradition, partly because of its emphasis on communication as interpersonal interaction and influence, but also because of the sheer number of theories that fit within the tradition's boundaries. It is also the only purely objective tradition, which means its results are specific and measurable, bringing clarity. While I lean toward enjoying the more creative rhetorical theories, as a Christian, I cannot support the precept that truth is relative. With our reliance on Jesus Christ and God's Word, the Bible, we find evidentiary value in Christ's statement in John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but except through me. There is but one truth, God's truth. The rest of us merely have perspectives. There are 3 theories that I chose to highlight here. expectancy violations theory, social penetration theory, and the uncertainty reduction theory, URT. Expectancy violations theory is the interpersonal communication theory that claims violations of expectations are, in certain situations, preferable to confirmations of expectations. The difference between positive and negative violations are also explored. Social penetration theory is furthered by self-disclosure. In a Rutgers University paper, Carpenter and Green quoted Altman and Taylor saying, social penetration describes the process of bonding that moves a relationship from superficial to more intimate. Finally, uncertainty reduction theory is a theory that uses passive, active, and interactive techniques to predict others' behavior. URT asserts that people have a need to reduce uncertainty about others by gaining information about them. These three theories are tools for understanding interpersonal communication. I chose to outline the critical tradition next because of the importance of free speech to me as an American, as a Christian. The critical tradition is part of a challenge to inequitable discourse. Culture industries, entertainment-related trades that rubber stamp the prevalent mindset of a particular culture and prevent individuals from perceiving unfair power hierarchies within society, like film, TV, music, social media, and advertising, are the enemy of critical scholars. Critical traditions are on the interpretive side of the polar structure. Those I will study here include cultural studies, standpoint theory, and muted group theory. Cultural studies and media communication is a necessarily interdisciplinary field, often drawing theoretical and methodological frameworks from a wide range of studies, including critical race and feminist theories, philosophy, political science, and rhetoric, among others. Standpoint theory is a mainly feminist perspective crafted by Sandra Harding and Julia Wood, who claim that one of the best ways to discover how the world works is to start the inquiry from the standpoint of women and other groups on the margins of society. Standpoint theory refers to a special perspective along with its attitudes and values. Muted group theory is another feminism-inspired outlook engendered by Cheris Primere, who maintains that all language is crafted by and for men. The belief that men's power and dominance in society limits, literally mutes women and other groups low on the totem pole is the essence of muted group theory. The critical tradition reminds me of the emperor who employed a slave to walk behind him, whispering in his ear, "You are only human." Critical traditions and society's chance to reflect on ourselves and be our own critic, openly and publicly. While I do not agree with all of the assertions in the theories, it is important for us to express doubt and prevent a singular human perspective from dominating the field. The rhetorical tradition is my favorite, and one I believe upholds a premier place in the communication tradition field map because of its artistry and ability to convey important ideas. Rhetoric is known as the well-honed art of persuasion, utilizing all available means to focus on the message by exploiting various techniques. Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Quintilian, and other Greco-Roman rhetors were the founders of excellent discourse as a discipline and laid the founders of the field. In this paper, we will cover symbolic convergence theory, the rhetoric, dramatism, and the narrative paradigm. The rhetoric theory was named for a written work, The Rhetoric, by Aristotle, who was a student of Plato during the golden age of Greek civilization. The author saw rhetoric as discovering all possible means of persuasion. Kenneth Burke, the theorist behind dramatism, insisted that anything freely said for a reason is a rhetorical act, like an actor putting on a dramatic show for an audience. Dramatism is the technique that analyzes language and thinking as a deliberate forward movement action instead of a singular channel for expressing information. The narrative paradigm is a lens by which one views all communication as story, so reasoned by the twin tests of rational coherence and rational fidelity. For example, one study of political success implied that the GOP did not utilize the best format, narratives, in order to capture its audience. In a postmodern culture that does not believe in absolute truth, this study asked the following question: are conservatives still using statistics and facts to communicate conservative principles? The study showed that narratives were far more effective in persuading an audience than statistical proof, ironically. This is why I tend to favor the rhetorical tradition. Its artistic style and persuasive bent allows for effective suasion in both public and private situations and allows for society to be convinced of absolute truths in a world where moral and ethical absolutes rarely exist. Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is an anchoring ideology based on the premise that language structure deeply impacts the way people think and what they do. This is perceived as construction of reality. In total, Sociocultural tradition is founded on the postulation that when humans interact through speech, culture is produced and reproduced naturally. At one time, the only culture that was considered worthwhile was fine art or high culture. Over time, it has become accepted that all human interaction, creation, and behavior is worthy of inspection. So once called low culture, as is now a popular vein of study. The socioculture tradition is another broad area that encapsulates many theories. The three we will study here are communicative constitution of organizations, symbolic interactionism, and media ecology. Communicative constitution of organization is Robert McPhee's group communication theory that believes people in conversation co-construct their social culture and intimate worlds. In this case, these worlds are organizations. McPhee agrees with other theorists who calculated their own premises early in the theory timeline that an organization is not found in the physical reality around an office. While people and office equipment are a must, only communication can bind us into an organization. Symbolic interactionism is George Herbert Mead's theory, which says that ongoing use of articulation and gesticulation is more like a conversation, requiring back and forth. Mead's theory that any thinking, self concept, and overall culture we experience are translated effectively through communication, thus, it equals symbolic interaction. Media ecology is one of Marshall McLuhan's well respected theories. The essence of the theory is encapsulated in his well-known epigraph, "The medium is the message." This antithetical axiom provides that in the grand scheme of things, that medium shapes our world far more than content. Phenomenology is founded on deliberate analysis of the daily experience of the average person and stresses the importance of human experience. Seeking to answer the question, why is it so hard to establish and sustain authentic human relationships, and how can this problem be overcome? Theorists in this tradition place great emphasis in personal encounters. The concomitant traditions covered herein are coordinated management of meaning, relational dialectics, and critical theory of communication in organizations. Coordinated management of meaning was codified by Barnett Pierce and Vernon Cronin in an answer to the oft bemoaned transmission method of communication. By creating our own social worlds, theory pioneers assert we co-construct our worlds and devise and shape them in our own realities. In other words, communication is not a thing done to us. Our text quotes Kim Pierce. Communication is not just a tool for exchanging ideas and information. It makes selves, relationships, organizations, communities, cultures, etc. This is what I've referred to as taking the communication perspective. Relational dialectics is a conceptual shift highlighting the messiness of human relationships, established by Leslie Baxter and Barbara Montgomery. A dynamic tangle of contraventions and intimate bonds is a reasonable definition illustrating relational dialectics. It characterizes the theory as an ongoing reciprocity between paradoxical dispositions. Critical theory of communication in organizations is Stanley Dietz's proposal unmasking a stratification of unethical, unfair, and injudicious communication policies within institutions. Dietz is a proponent for stakeholder participation. Since multinational corporations seek to wield power over individuals, Dietz says that they are more powerful than the church, family, and state in their propensity to impact people. Each of these interpersonal communication theories tie individual behaviors to phenomenon in the wider world. Semiotics is said to be the study of verbal and nonverbal cues that may be indicative of alternate meanings and the way that the interpretation of these symbols impact culture. I.A. Richards and other semiologists say that significance is not inherent in words or symbolic instead. They find meaning within the essence of people. Communication in the semiotic tradition is based on the process and study of sharing meaning through the inspection and observation of signs and symbols. In this paper, we will capture some sample theories from the tradition, cultural approach to organizations, semiotics, and genderless styles. Cultural Approach to Organizations by Clifford Geertz and Michael Pakinowski pictured culture as webs of significance that each individual weave around their being. Considering themselves ethnographers, Geertz and Panikowski became members of an organization as the individuals involved experience it, enlightening them to the layered nuances of what, why, and how people and culture think they are doing something. French literary critic and semiologist Roland Barthes claimed that semiotics was an adventure. The practice of semiotics is analyzing both the verbal and nonverbal variety. Deborah Tannen, author of Genderless Styles, believes that primarily women seek rapport and interpersonal communication, along with a strong desire for human connection, being in touch, belonging, and intimacy, while men of the species focus on information during conversation, as well as bragging about and establishing status, independence, freedom, and accomplishment, always wanting to be top dog. In other words, men and women really are from different planets, Mars and Venus, linguistically and dialectically. These three theories are tied together by their focus on the experiential primacy of communication. The cybernetic tradition involves the study of information processing, feedback, and control in communication systems. MIT scientist Norbert Wiener crafted cybernetics to link individual components of a variety of systems, things like computer systems, family systems, a system of social support, or a media system. Wiener's feedback was crucial to founding the tradition wherein theorists endeavor to prove the answers to such queries as what could change this system, how does it work, and how can we get the bugs out? Cybernetics are represented by three distinct theories located herein: communication privacy management theory, the interactional view, and functional perspective of group decision making. Sandra Petronio, a communication professor at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, chartered communication privacy management theory. CPM contains three main parts: privacy ownership, privacy boundaries, and privacy turbulence. The interactional view by Paul Watzlawick is conceived on the premise that the movement of any independent member of a family affects the movement of others, as in a baby's cribmobile. In order to comprehend the actions of any single figure in the family system, one has to examine the communication patterns among all its members. Conceived by Randy Hirakawa and Dennis Gorin, functional perspective is considered a prescriptive outlook that chronicles and prognosticates successful group execution by rendering four communication functions. These are problem analysis, goal setting, identification of alternatives, and evaluation of positive and negative characteristics. Commonalities in the cybernetic tradition involve system analysis and execution. In studying the seven classifications of traditional communication models and the stratified theories therein, we come to the conclusion that a clearer comprehension gleaned from physically executed visual field map has aided in our studies tremendously. After identifying and describing each theory, socio-psychological, cybernetic, rhetorical, semiotic, sociocultural, critical, and phenomenological, I regulated the traditions into a manageable visual map, like cogs on a wheel inserted below. This has been Amy Wright Payne for COM 403 at California Baptist University under the instruction of Professor Sandra Romo. Thank you for listening.